Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Pal. A while back I had done a video where I actually did a recipe video, but in that video I talked a little bit about veganism and the ethics behind the idea of veganism, and specifically I also mentioned some examples about fish. And lately I've just had some comments kind of back and forth with somebody about fish and consuming fish, and especially not fish necessarily, but I should say aquatic life, so things like shells and mussels and things that are kind of like lower down on the scale of what we think of as like being sentient. And a lot of people argue about whether like shellfish are sentient or they're just little unfeeling, basically little biological robots, I think is what was the quote that I saw. But anyway, I obviously don't eat any kind of shellfish. I don't eat clams or oysters or anything. I don't think there's any need to, and I just say err on the side of caution. Whether or not they feel pain is kind of irrelevant to me, and they're not a plant and they're not a fungus, so I stay away from them. And but go check out that video if you haven't seen it. I think it'll give you some kind of insight as to what I'm getting at in this video if you haven't seen it yet. But what I want to talk today about is kind of related to that topic. In that in the video that I'll link below, I talked a little bit about why I think people can't relate to fish and why they don't feel as connected. So a lot of people who consider themselves vegetarian, they'll eat fish, or they're technically pescatarians, what the correct term is for them, but they won't eat pork, or they won't eat pigs, they won't eat chickens, they won't eat cows, etc., but they will eat fish. And I think a lot of it is that they just can't empathize with them. You don't see fish like you see these animals. They don't breathe the same way. They're hidden from our view in the water. You don't have them as as even like a petting zoo kind of like interaction with them. So they're just they're very different. They feel different. They're in cold environments. So they have scales. They're not soft to the touch like a fuzzy little piglet might be or whatever. So anyway, I think that's kind of the the gist of that video. But check it out. And what I want to talk about today is related in the sense that insects are a lot like this, I think, for a lot of people. They don't really think much of them because A, they're really small, so it's easy to just kind of like swat them away, crush them, whatever. And B, they look kind of gross because people just assume that they're not cute and cuddly and whatever, so they're not like these animals that we would tend to have as pets, or even as farm animals that we would pet in a petting zoo. And it's very easy to just kind of look down on them. But ultimately, again, going back to the ethics of veganism, there's absolutely no reason to try and harm unnecessarily even the bugs. I've talked a lot about this in previous videos when I talk about agriculture and farming and why I do kind of advocate the style of farming that I do, which is a kind of no-till, food forest type, small scale, gardening at home. And the reason being is that it's minimizing the harm as much as possible. Now, I'm not saying that I've never crushed earthworms or bugs or what have you. Obviously I have, but I don't do it intentionally, and it's I've talked about this in another video too. Maybe I'll link both of those videos and you can check those out. But the thing is that insects in general, I think, they get a bad rap because they're sort of like the fish. They're very different. They're easy to kind of think they're gross or harmful, but we often forget how crucial and critical they are to our own existence. And a lot of people have said that if all the pollinating bugs like bees and other similar kind of little insects would disappear off the face of the earth, humanity would be wiped out. In fact, it could be argued that maybe most or many animals would be wiped out because simply a lot of the food sources would simply stop existing. A lot of the fruits and other kinds of plants that rely on these pollinators would simply not be able to produce fruit and produce food to feed all the animals of the earth. So bees are super important. I think most people nowadays are starting to get hip to this, and they are starting to understand that that's a really important thing to protect our bees. But at the same time, we are seeing these massive bee colony die-offs where the whole colonies are disappearing and dying, and it's kind of unexplained. No one really has a definitive answer as to what's happening to them, and there's different theories about what's going on. So I want to talk about that today. And I'm going to show you guys some stuff that I found interesting, and I also want to say thanks to Dave. David's one of my regular viewers and subscribers, and he's always in the comments. You probably have seen him, and I want to say thanks a lot. We had some interesting discussions about bees, and he kind of gave me the idea for some of this video, and I'm going to be also playing you guys a clip that he sent me of a bee that he rescued, which is super cool. I think the video is really fun. I'll show it to you guys in a little bit. But basically, if if you're on Twitter, follow me. I post all sorts of stuff, and lately I've posted things about bees. And one of the things that I've seen a lot posted on Facebook as well as Twitter from people that I know is this idea that if you see a bee that's kind of not really active and not really flying around anymore and can barely be moving, a lot of times they're just simply dehydrated or basically hungry, and you can actually sometimes save them and resuscitate them by giving them some sugar water. So they basically will go in and drink the water. They'll be resuscitated by the sustenance of the sugar, and then they'll be able to go off and fly away and go back to the hive. So that's what David did. He saved the bee. I'll show you guys that video shortly. And I've talked about this as well, that if you have a garden, plant lots of flowers and attract the bees as much as you can. Try to have as much of a natural environment as possible. Don't use any pesticides and things that can harm the bees. So have little pools of water out, maybe if you have a little pond or something, that could be very useful. But absolutely having lots of flowers will definitely help the bees. So yeah, let me get into showing you guys some information about the bees, and then we'll watch the clip from David, and I'll show you some more bees from our garden at the end. So let's get into it. So one of the things that David sent me was this link where it showed that there's this huge bee colony collapse that happened. This is a very recent article. This is from March of this year, and it basically looks like this particular tragedy. Really, 37 million bees are estimated from 600 hives that have died. This was probably a result of some of the pesticides that are being used in the U.S., which have previously already been banned in the EU. And I'll link this story here too, so you can check it out. But basically, what they're saying is that these new types of pesticides are called neonicotinoids, or neonics. They've been blamed for colony collapse in countries in the EU, and they've banned them as a subsequent action. But they do say that they, of course, they're manufactured by Bayer Corporation, and they were protesting the ban. But ultimately these are still being used in the U.S., and they are possibly blamed for the colony collapse. And there's just a whole bunch of other pesticides that could be causing issues as well. They say that here U.S. scientists have found 121 different pesticides in samples of bees, wax, and pollen, lending credence to the notion that pesticides are a key problem. So this is just an interesting article, and it shows you all the dead bees, and it's very sad. One of the things that I also didn't mention at the beginning is the whole ethical side of why we as vegans don't consume honey. When I first decided that I was going to basically become a vegan, it was I have a video on that too, so you can watch kind of the story behind it. But ultimately at that time, I really couldn't understand the thing about not eating honey, because I figured that's just, yeah, the bees make it, but that you're not harming the bees by taking it. But ultimately you are. And I didn't know any better. I mean, there's a lot of videos out there already. I would recommend the video from Bite Size Vegan. Emily's done a wonderful job explaining all the kind of nuances of the ethical arguments against consuming honey. But in a nutshell, the way I can look at it is this: there's no way that you can actually take the honey from the bees without causing some harm to them. Most of the beehives, in like commercial use, do harm some of the bees just from simply opening them, or trying to get the honey out. Some of the bees are killed. They do fumigate the bees to kind of settle them down with smoke. The queen bees often have their wings ripped off, so that they don't fly away and can't move the hive anywhere. There's a whole host of things that make it kind of an unethical practice. But again, it's unnecessary. We don't need honey. And as you can see here, they find 121 various pesticides and chemicals in there. It's probably not as healthy as most people think honey is. I used to think honey was very healthy. And very quickly, once I started looking into it, after I had decided to basically become a vegan, where the only thing I was still eating was honey, and it was only for like a couple weeks after I decided to become a vegan, I did some research, and I very quickly said, oh, okay, that's why. And then I stopped consuming honey, and I haven't since. So yeah, that was one thing I just wanted to talk about, and they give you the specific names of the these pesticides that got banned. And then the other thing that David mentioned was that there was a suspicion that some certain type of tree was actually causing the deaths of the bees, and it was the silver linden tree. It's also called the basswood tree, and it has some other names too. Oh yeah, lime trees. Yeah, here you go. So specifically, I guess the silver linden tree has been linked to mass bee deaths. And this is a wonderful, article. You can see the whole thing here. I would say, check this out, read through it. I haven't read through the whole thing, I'll be honest, but I did do some research and read through some of this, or most of it. And the key points here are that it's actually not really the tree that's causing the deaths of the bees. In this review, we conclude that from existing literature, there is no experimental evidence for toxicity to bees in the linden nectar. So there actually isn't a cause directly from the tree. And if you go here to the insecticides, you can see that it basically says, yes, this tree, this is the name of the tree, does not poison bees. Insecticide application to the tree can. Tilia trees are occasionally treated with insecticides against aphids, and several instances of bumblebee deaths under T. cordata have recently occurred in Oregon, U.S. One outstanding case, over 50,000 bees died, owing to the widespread misconception about the presence of toxic sugars in the linden nectar, but some sources erroneously suggested naturally occurring nectar toxins caused these bee kills, but they obviously didn't. And they're basically saying that they judged that the neonicotinoid diinotefuran, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, had been applied to the trees prior to the event as the cause. And the neonicotinoids are potent neurotoxins for honeybees and bumblebees. Even when applied outside the flowering period, the neonicotinoids can persist in plant tissues and subsequently occur at concentrations detrimental to bees and pollen and nectar. They're basically recommending that these pesticides should be prohibited on flowering trees, like the silver linden. So anyway, I just wanted to share this, basically, ultimately the best thing you can do is to actually go back to kind of a permaculture style gardening, where you are not using chemicals, you're not using these pesticides, herbicides, all these other things that can cause all sorts of imbalances and problems, and be basically poisoning the bees and other other useful bugs. And these words, harmful and useful, are really just from our own perspective. It's what we think we want, and we're constantly kind of mucking around in nature and kind of messing things up because we are making these totally out of balance, unnatural kinds of things. I'm going to have a video coming up soon where I'm going to be talking about permaculture and polyculture versus monoculture, and I'll address a lot of these points there. But just in a nutshell, what you need to know is that when you decide that you're going to make these massive, large-scale monoculture plantings where you just have like rows and rows of just the same exact identical corn, you're kind of inviting disaster, because that's a completely unnatural type of thing. You've basically scorched or killed or tilled the earth and gotten rid of every other plant that's in there. You plant in only one crop, and then you're wondering why there's some kind of like infestation of like one particular bug that particularly does well on that particular type of food and is adapted to that. If you had many different kinds of plants in there, and including native species of maybe even just with some weeds and things that just grow wild, those bugs would never get a chance to develop into like an infestation. So you would never have to actually deal with an infestation. You wouldn't need the pesticides to begin with, because you wouldn't have just that one type of bug that feeds on just that plant. So anyway, I hope you guys found this interesting, and do some more research and grow some flowers in your garden if you can. Be nice to bees if you can. If you see one that's in need, try the sugar water. I'll put in a link to a story that talks about that too. I think it was the Live Kindly site that I saw it on first. I don't remember, but anyway, I'll dig one up and I'll link that in for you guys. And then now I'm going to just end with the video I got from David, and the video that I shot in the poppy flowers in our garden. So I hope you guys enjoy it. See you guys in the next one. Thanks for everybody for subscribing. The numbers just keep going up. We're well over 300 now. I think like 314 the last I saw. So that's fantastic. I'm super excited about it. And thanks to everybody, and see you guys in the next one. Bye.
This is coconut water. It's good for you. It's got a lot of nutrients. You're lacking vitamin P from the way you're moving. Take the nutrients. Please take the nutrients.